So this is my final music ed vlog about my placement. I had my last day of placement on Monday, and it was definitely a bittersweet moment. I was kind of sad that it's ending because then this means that the semester is also ending and everything's kind of piling up. And I really enjoyed kind of working and seeing these kids every week. Um, and what really struck me is that the class that I've been mostly working with, the grade 3 class, um, one of the little girls had said, "Hey, you weren't here last week. Why weren't you here?" And it really shocked me because I was surprised that they had noticed I wasn't there and that she even asked me about it because I just haven't been able, really, the way that the class was structured, to kind of really have one-on-one individual time or work with these kids, because we kind of go right into things and they don't do any like worksheets, or they haven't done the worksheets the periods that I've been there or whatnot, and the teacher teaches by concept based. So we've been going through like songs and dancing and doing all these things to kind of integrate all these different concepts, and then they understand like difference of 3/4 time, 2/4 time, and whatnot. But I haven't been able really to kind of talk to any of the kids other than like, oh, like maybe I think one time I said to somebody like, "Oh, I like your shoes" or something, or we were talking about the difference between one of the songs that's in 2/4 and one of the songs in 3/4. So I kind of facilitated a conversation with my neighbor, but we really haven't had that much of one-on-one interaction, or really where I exchange words with any of the kids, other than singing through song. So I was like a little surprised by that, and it made me think about, what does my presence in this classroom do and how does it affect the kids? Because if you would have asked me this question before, I would have said, okay, well, yeah, there's definitely some sort of impact because there's someone new in their environment they're not used to, they don't know, they're questioning, okay, why is this person, who's this person, why are they here, where are they from, what are they doing, are they grading me, or what are they doing, are they doing some sort of special project, are they from the school board, or are they another teacher, or whatnot, lots of other questions, right? Because the teacher had just kind of said, this is this person, my name, and they'll be with us for a couple weeks. So yeah, and I would have probably said, yeah, I probably maybe have distracted some kids a bit, or kind of taken away their attention from their teacher sometimes, maybe, or something like that for some of the classes, because I haven't been singing with all the classes. It's only been the grade 3 class that I worked with, and not the 7/8 or the 5/6 ukulele class. The 7/8 is a string class, and for those two classes, I've just kind of sat back in the corner, as bad as it sounds, and observed, because they run it more of a rehearsal style. So that I really didn't have the chance to interact as much with. But yeah, so I would have said probably I didn't have such a lasting impact. But then after hearing that comment from one of the kids, I was like, okay, so this has been noted, and there's more of an impact, and there's a greater impact than I think. And that's the thing, when you never know how somebody reacts to something, and everyone comes from a different background and perspectives, where, smiling to someone can mean nothing versus to someone who maybe have had a bad day, or is going through a rough time, and seeing someone smile at them means the world and makes the world of a difference. You just never know how small or big a gesture may seem to you, but how that impacts other people. So that definitely changed my perspective on how my presence was impactful at my placement. And I will never fully know how my observance and interaction will have affected any of the kids. I think probably they'll remember what they remember is me just being kind of in their classroom and singing songs and playing their games with them. And then I led one class, but not to a significant point where I'd be like, oh yeah, that changed my life. But that's not the point of this, right? But it definitely opened up my eyes to how the presence of someone can definitely change or shift your mood and attitude. And I'm now thinking back of when like student teachers have like come into a lesson and they've just watched and observed a lesson. Your attention to detail, and you kind of put on your best self. So I'm sure some of that kind of went on, but I never really got the full extent of it. So that was, I think, really great that that happened on my last day because it kind of made me think of, well, what overall happened then every time I went to that placement. So yeah, it was really great, and I just felt really warm and fuzzy in a way that a child, one of the kids, had noticed in the class that I wasn't there. So that was really nice. But yeah, my last day of placement, I did teach. I led a class, so I had some support from the teacher, and I was supposed to actually teach a new concept and song to them, and a new game that was associated with the song, excuse me. But I just hadn't had enough time to learn it, and from being sick, I just didn't, and I didn't feel comfortable wanting to stare down on a sheet, especially in front of a group of like 20 so kids, and they're all relying on you to be confident. So I led some songs that I had previously known and felt better about, and it was a really good experience. I don't think it wasn't anything scary, really. All the kids knew a lot of the songs and were super comfortable with them. They knew them way better than me, so I was a little kind of taken back because sometimes the kids would just look at me like they're like, "Yeah, I know what to do," and you don't need to like tell me or anything. So, and then they were doing actions to the song, and I didn't know the actions, so I asked one of them to go over the actions. I asked if anyone could go over the actions and tell me what the actions mean, and then it turned out that the actions were actually the solfa of that song. So I thought that was really cool that that was another way to incorporate solfa because I would have never known if I hadn't asked. So it's really nice to see how there's multiple concepts that can be incorporated at a time for something that seems as simple as singing a song, like a folk song. So that was really interesting to me because I was just shocked that there was more than meets the eye. So yeah, and then when everything went pretty well, like everyone was able, all the kids were able to sing, follow along, and then it was until the end when I had to do Frère Jacques, and we did it in a round, and I kind of didn't know that I was supposed to cue kids in. I kind of just went off of my instincts and be like, okay, I'm ready to go, so let's all go. And I hadn't thought of, okay, kids are waiting for me to tell them to come in. So when we first started the round, it did not go successfully. And I really appreciate the support from my supervisor because she had mentioned, okay, why don't we try doing this and see if this works and if this helps. And it was really, I really appreciated it because it was a great suggestion that I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. And I'm glad you helped me because it kind of didn't work. And instead of there being awkward silence where I was like, I don't know how to fix this, I had somebody come in and help and support me. So that was really nice. And then counting one group in and then trying to sing with them and then counting someone else, another group in, was a little hard for me. It went better than the first time, but it wasn't smooth sailing. But it wasn't a train wreck, so that was really good. And I wish I had more of a chance to do this kind of interaction and leading early on in my placement. Well, not super early on, but earlier, so I could have had more exposure working with the kids. And that just goes back to probably at the beginning planning out better. And I do think it was beneficial for me to observe a rehearsal of a strings class and a 7/8 or a 5/6 ukulele class. However, I wish I had maybe have just come in once or twice to observe those over instead of the multiple times because I couldn't do any interacting with the kids because they were in the more rehearsal style, so they had specific things to work on, and I also can't help with the strings class. So, and I hadn't talked with the supervisor about, okay, for this class, like, can I come and interact, and if someone's needing help, like, can I go up and help them, kind of thing. So I wish I also had taken that initiative, but I think it would have been really good if I kept working on with the similar classes, like the lower classes, where it's a more interactive based concept teaching. Yeah, but overall, it was such a great experience, and I kind of wanted to take this experience to see if teaching music in a classroom setting is something that I would like to do, because I haven't had that experience through my learning of music. I was in a children's choir, and then I did private lessons and then private piano lessons. So I haven't really gone through a system of music education in a school system environment. So I never really thought or seen myself in that role. So I really appreciated taking this time to do this placement. And I thought at the end of it, I would have a yes or no answer to one or the other if I'd want to do it or not. But I still don't know. There were positives and there were negatives, and things that I liked and that I disliked about the whole classroom teaching, such as like I don't know how my supervisor did it, and knowing all these kids. Well, we're in March, so they've had so much time together. But she told me she only sees these kids twice a week for 45 minutes a day when they see each other. That is not a lot of time to get through a lot of music. It's different through, well, it's not different. You still have kids who are taking music lessons or in group classes or whatnot who don't want to be there and are just being forced by their parents. But generally, there's a higher number of kids who are there because they want to learn music and they want to do it. So just dealing with that and how kids don't want to be there, the short amount of time and the quick turnover, it was crazy. Like these 7-8 kids like having to set up, take down instruments, put everything away, and then set up for the next class, and then keep going and keep going and keep going. It was such a quick, fast-paced, and I know my supervisor does foster a relationship with the students, but I'm just wrestling with how to do that, especially just because I've little experience working that quick kind of thing. Okay, actually, no, I take that back. Like, you definitely can do this. You can do that because I've done this before when I've taught swimming lessons, and you do have a bond with kids. But I've never seen myself in that role, and I've never really like played a lot of instruments. And I would just stay closer to vocals. So it's always been kind of a daunting, scary concept to teach music in a classroom. But then I love working with kids, and music is such a great and powerful thing, and it's so amazing to have that ability to teach that to someone else, or teach and foster that environment of the love of music. And definitely we need more people who discover that because it comes in so many different ways. So there are plus and there's negatives and positives to both sides, and I'm still kind of undecided on what would be my end goal of doing it, if this is something I would like to do. But I think overall it was such a great experience to kind of get more insight into this classroom setting and how music is done in this way, especially for my curriculum. I had no music coming into school, and I went to a small all French Catholic school, so it did open my eyes to how kind of a public elementary school works, and how it's changed from when I went to school and what are new protocols and stuff like that. So it was really great, and I'm glad I did that, and I am glad I had the opportunity to do this experience and work within my community and work with these kids. It was really great. I really enjoyed it. As much as it was kind of weird just sitting and observing, I definitely got things out of it that I would have never known or figured out before. So it was a great learning process. So some of the things that I thought were pretty just noteworthy to kind of talk about is that there was a student in the 5-6 ukulele class that was struggling, and the teacher and I had talked about this before the class before my last, and how he is the kind of student who just says, no, I can't do it, I'm not good enough, I can't do it, and then just shuts down. And he's also sitting beside a student who's more advanced in the ukulele and has a really easy time playing, and he just gets very frustrated himself and just stops. So she's talking through, I thought maybe of moving him, sitting beside somebody else who's more at his level so you can feel a bit more comfortable, but the student says no, and I want to sit beside my friend. So she said it's just very difficult because she's talked with his actual classroom teacher, and that's just who he is as a person. He just shuts down. So it's hard when you have a student who's struggling and you want to help out and you want to just kind of take them along and help them, but you have 20 other students to think about at the time, right? And you do have to get through something, and you want to keep the kids entertained. So it's a very delicate balance, and I felt that this last class that we had, she did an excellent job because she said something wasn't working. They were working through a song and it went kind of, and she gave everyone 5 minutes to rehearse by themselves and practice and go over the certain notes. And then she took that child kind of one-on-one, and she also let the other girl that was beside him go and practice on a low ukulele and have a more advanced topic. So she was busy and he was kind of left alone, so she could help him one-on-one and helped working through it and motivating him. And I thought that was such an excellent way to utilize the time so that other kids are distracted, not focused on him, and that there was just, it was just, I think, a well thought out plan of how to deal with that situation. And I really appreciated seeing that how she probably didn't have rehearsal time in her schedule, because I've seen before how she plans it, and it's kind of working through a few different things where there hasn't really been rehearsal time. So I'm sure that was a deviation, or I can't be sure, but I'm assuming it's a deviation from her plan to kind of help be flexible and then modulate to something that would fit the now, which I was really impressed with, because as a teacher, you know, you're dealing with kids who are human. You know, they have so many different things going on in their life, and you know, just thinking of myself, I react so differently, and my mood changes so drastically from hour to hour, day to day. So I think being flexible is so important, and seeing that, it was really great, and how she readjusted to help all the overall students, because everyone then came back in and had a more successful time playing through the one's piece, as well as then this one individual student had, I think, a better and positive interaction with playing after. Like, he had some help and had some motivation, so, and some reassurance. So that was really great. And then there was a really good conversation that you were having, Beth, between my supervisor and yourself about Indigenous music. And I thought that was really interesting to listen into, because the topic of how I think about just incorporating not only Indigenous music, but I feel as well as Indigenous teaching, and not like teaching their like their legends and whatnot, but teaching kids about our Indigenous people is kind of a sore topic. And even I feel like talking about Indigenous people sometimes in certain academic settings is very kind of, okay, like, we're gonna talk about this, like, it's almost, it's not taboo, but people are afraid to say the wrong thing, especially with even some people aren't sure, okay, do I say First Nations or do I say Indigenous? And it's a real topic that, you know, a lot of people struggle with, just as humans and then as well as educators. And we had someone come into my last year in music and politics class and talk about how we kind of talked about, not random things, but he kind of, the presenter had like things he wanted to talk about, and then people were asking questions, and then one of the questions was like, well, my mom's a music teacher and she struggles all the time with how to teach Indigenous music and just about Indigenous people without stepping on anyone's toes per se, and especially coming from a white female perspective. You know, you don't want to come across as being ignorant or belligerent or storytelling or inflicting your own opinions and values into the story. And especially with Indigenous music, some of it is, not some of it, it all is kind of sacred. And I definitely, when this conversation was having, I thought back of this conversation, how, you know, it's so, we don't know kind of what to say or how to do it in a proper way. So I feel that sometimes it's just kind of skirted over, or like we acknowledge, like, okay, like the land recognition now that Western does is like, we all say this, but then do people really mean it, and do people really understand it, and is it said with meaning, or is it just kind of like we put a band-aid over it to say, we're acknowledging these people, these land, but we really don't mean it or understand its meaning or its representation and its impact and say it meaningfully. So I feel like sometimes we do that, or do that kind of gesture that is kind of like putting a band-aid over something to make, because we don't want to delve into the surface, or we don't know how to delve into the surface and do that. So it was just, this is a really interesting conversation to kind of think about how do you do that? And especially even in topics that are sensitive, like I feel as well as like sometimes if you were teaching a history class, this wouldn't happen in music, but okay, this could happen in music because if you're doing a piece about, like Martin Luther King, like how to teach that from a different perspective where you're not a minority and you come from a life of privilege and you don't want to seem ignorant, especially if you have students in your class that are from that background. You there's always a fear of just coming across kind of racist, and it definitely, I think, when that presenter from my class came in, he said, acknowledge that you don't know the topic that well, and you're coming from what you've only learned, and saying kind of, I'm not an expert, and this isn't obviously going to be um or I'm not the most qualified person to talk about this, or saying some sort of like disclaimer, I think is a great way. And then um, I can't remember what he said else, but I remember this when I had a conversation later on with my supervisor and we were talking about it. And oh, oh my God, I'm so sorry. This definitely skipped me. I think we were talking about, yeah, just saying how you're not an expert. And I think really giving more of the meaning behind it from what you've learned if you've done like a drumming workshop, and then kind of relating it back to what you've learned. And oh, okay, now he said that most of the things we do is related back to the land. So kind of reemphasizing that, and that also just saying, we're doing this kind of out of respect and kind of, I think, yeah, putting a disclaimer was what he kind of said, is just say, I don't know everything on this topic. I'm not an expert, but we're going to do this and we're going to treat it with respect. And I think it's the way you approach the situation and approach the topic as well. And doing that is better. I don't know where I'm going with this, but anyways, yeah, I think it, and I think this kind of fear, and I'm now kind of incorporating because now I'm like, oh, I don't want to say anything that's wrong, comes from, I haven't had a lot of experience with, even learning about indigenous people. So I think it comes from, we don't want to sound ignorant, especially as educators. You know, what you say in front of kids are just like sponges and they absorb everything. So it's a very interesting, you don't want to say the wrong thing. And especially if you would have someone from that culture and background in your class. And it's a very fine line, I feel sometimes, that of what you can and can't say. And sometimes, we're all humans and things slip out, and you then think back, okay, I shouldn't have said that. Or, you never know how something is going to resonate or not resonate well with someone, too. So I think that this whole conversation also then touches back on kind of watching what you say and thinking about what you say before talking and ensuring that, you mean what you say. And if you don't mean it, then say, don't say it. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going around kind of on a tangent, but yeah. So I think it was a pretty interesting conversation because I've known from just this other presenter coming to my other class and people bring up questions that this is a very big topic, not just in music education, but education in general. And there is a right way to go about it, but I feel like there's multiple routes that direct you to that in different ways you can get to the right way. And there's not like one set outline. Okay, here's how you teach this, or here's how you go about explaining this. So yeah, I think it was pretty interesting, and I would be really interested to see more about how the incorporation of or the revamp of that education system or music education system you're talking about, Beth, would turn out, because that's pretty interesting that that's happening on the west coast of Canada. So that'd be pretty cool to see what the difference is and how it changes and how the awareness of our indigenous people then becomes. Because I know from my education, I never talked about our indigenous people, I think, until like grade 8. I mean, we learned stories about our in French they're called autochtones and certain stories, but it was just never in depth, and it was always told from a historical white perspective. So it was very interesting then when I learned later on, and I heard someone from a residential camp or residential school speak, and hearing their experience, and then watching documentaries from a social science class on our First Nations and their kind of living situation, especially up not up north, but in Nunavut. And it was really eye opening because I was like, I am not educated on this, and this is shocking because I am living in my little bubble. So to see that our Indigenous people and this is someone's experience in Canada, it was really shocking and kind of horrifying to see. So it was a great perspective moment when I had that. But yeah, obviously you can't kind of divulge the horrors of a residential school to third graders, but there would be definitely a way of teaching Indigenous drumming, or like making your own drum, or how to teach that kind of, or how to teach, or how to introduce and create a open and positive environment to foster this kind of learning of this culture and music. Yeah, I think that's how I want to word that. I don't know. But yeah, that was all I wanted to kind of say for my placement videos, and it was a really interesting experience. I definitely, the more I reflect on it, the more I see what I learned and what happened during every class, and how it affected the kids overall, I think, and how they grew in such a short period of time as well. It was very impactful to see that. So yeah, thanks so much